Colombian famous politician Ingrid Betancourt announced her candidacy for May's presidential elections here in Colombia. This is a pretty unexpected event since she was out of politics after getting kidnapped by FARC, by Marxist guerrilla, Marxist terrorist group FARC in 2002. She was kidnapped on this year when she was at that moment presidential candidate. Of course, this situation was one of the darkest moments in the history of Colombia, given the fact that she was a pretty popular candidate and one of the most important female political figures at that moment. She had a lot of popularity, and this situation filled Colombia with anger and sadness, especially if we remember that she lasted 6 years kidnapped by FARC. She was eventually liberated in the year 2008. This situation was quite famous all around the world. Almost every single media outlet all across the world was reporting on the situation of Colombian Ingrid Betancourt and the way this Marxist terrorist group kidnapped her and committed all types of atrocities all across the country. In fact, there are many reports that suggest she suffered all type of violence by some of the guerrilla members. So, getting to this point, it is quite particular, it is quite peculiar that Ingrid Betancourt's main slogan on this new candidacy is the same one as in the year 2002 when she was kidnapped. This slogan is essentially fighting against corruption in Colombia. She will be part of the centrist coalition along with candidates Sergio Fajardo and Alejandro Gaviria, of whom we already talked in a previous episode. So this is quite interesting because on this political coalition, Sergio Garrido is the main favorite. Sergio Garrido is the main favorite of the centrist faction of Colombia's political spectrum. So the fact that Ingrid Betancourt decided at this moment to be part of the presidential election, basically, the fact that she decided to be another candidate gets things more interesting, because we need to remember that her candidacy radically changes Colombia's presidential election, since the centrist faction will now have more power, but on the other hand, it could actually fall into a pretty rough internal war, because at this point it was almost for sure that Sergio Garrido was going to win the primaries for this political faction. However, the sudden and unexpected rise of Ingrid Betancourt could change absolutely everything. And on the other hand, another element that it is quite interesting from Betancourt's rise is the fact that in case this political faction doesn't end up getting into the real deal, which will be like the final, the first or the second round, if they don't end up being one of the two candidates that are going to fight for the presidency, it remains unclear whether they are going to support radical left-winger Gustavo Petro, or who many believe will be the other candidate, Oscar Iván Zuluaga, who is the representative of or the government's party Centro Democrático. In case this happens, it remains unclear who of these two candidates the centrist coalition is going to vote for. We need to remember that on the previous presidential election between the current president, Iván Duque, then presidential candidate, and Gustavo Petro, Ingrid Betancourt decided to vote for the radical left-winger. So it remains unclear what is going to happen now that she's going to be part of this centrist coalition, because at that moment she was more, not only an independent, she was basically out of politics. She was actually living in France at that moment. So at this point, considering that the centrist faction is not exactly the biggest fan of Gustavo Petro, it remains unclear what is going to happen now that Ingrid Betancourt is going to fighting for the presidency. Reporting from Medellin, Colombia, Luis Orozco, Newsweek.